I'm excited for the Shark Tank React of Breathometer because Mark Cuban made waves recently when he came out and said that one, he had never made money, he hasn't made money on his Shark Tank deals, and two, that Breathometer was his by far worst investment ever. So let's dive in and see what happened.
Next into the tank is a Silicon Valley veteran with an innovation he hopes will save lives.
Hello Sharks, my name is Charles Michael Yim, and I'm the founder and CEO of Breathometer. I'm asking for $250,000 for 10% equity stake in my company. So just imagine you're at a dinner party, or maybe even a tailgate. Better yet, we're at a local bar with some friends having some champagne. Would anyone care for a glass?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were joking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori. Here you go.
Thank you.
All right.
Damon doesn't like champagne, so I'll take his.
Host totally does. There you go.
That's Damon's favorite drink.
Thank you, senor. Charles, what should we toast to?
Pitching to the Sharks.
To you, Charles.
Thank you.
Sometimes it ends badly, though.
So you know how it goes.
So foreboding.
You eat some food, you have some drinks. Before you know it, the night's over and it's time to go home. And the most important question is, are you safe to drive? And who would want to carry one of these bulky old breathalyzers around? So that's why I created Breathometer, the world's first smartphone breathalyzer. It's so small, it can fit in your pocket. Let me show you how it works. Simply retract the audio jack, plug it into the smartphone, activate the app. Within a matter of seconds, you'll be able to know what your breath alcohol level is. And better yet, it can even tell you how long it'll take to sober up. And if need be, you can even hail a cab with a push of a button. So please join me on this mission to help people make smarter and safer decisions, one breath at a time. Thank you.
So this is an interesting concept. I don't drink, honestly, so, wouldn't provide a lot of value to me. But I can see how it would be really valuable to other people. What's interesting is when this came out, there were a lot of devices hitting the market that did similar things. Everyone could see the potential of the iPhone and smartphones generally of having this supercomputer essentially in your pocket. And so there were all kinds of devices, IoT and so forth, that would like plug in or do different things to really expand the capabilities of the phone. And for some reason, none of them have taken off, right? Like, I can't think of a single device today that I really like plug into my phone to like expand its capabilities. If anything, like over time, that functionality has just been baked into the actual phone. But look, at this time, like there were a lot of companies doing somewhat similar things. So, not a surprising idea at all.
So is this already on the market? Are you selling it currently?
So we basically launched in March via an Indiegogo campaign. We sold 4,000 units within 30 days. We generated $140,000 in revenue.
Indiegogo is a crowdfunding.
It's just like Kickstarter, correct.
What do you sell them?
So that's interesting. So 4,000 units, $140,000 total. That means that he was selling them for about $35 a piece. That right there makes me a little bit nervous. So it makes me nervous for a few reasons. One, $35, like I can see why he was able to sell 4,000 units because 35 is right in that impulse territory, in terms of pricing. And so, a lot of people, they'll just spend $30-ish without thinking about it too hard. So I can see that was good, but I mean, $35 for this device at only 4,000 units, like I would be shocked if he can even have them manufactured for that little. And even if he can, like, I mean, I gotta imagine his manufacturing cost has gotta be probably $15, $20, $30 at least. The other thing is that he claims it as revenue, but it's only revenue after you've delivered the product. And so there's a big question mark there.
Sell them for, Charles.
$49.99.
Can we see it?
Yes.
I've thought one of the biggest issues around these things when the first handheld units came out was that you get arrested, or worse, you harm somebody because you're drunk, and you relied on the device to make your decision. Isn't that a huge liability to you?
First and foremost, there's no replacement for good judgment. And so the Breathometer device basically promotes making smarter and safer decisions. We provide the instruction manual, we clearly label disclaimers throughout the app, And as long as we do our part in the due diligence and we uphold our side, we're in the clear.
I'd be really curious to see what an attorney thinks of that, because I feel like you would still potentially be on the hook for some liability, and that they could make a case against you. I mean, you can paper it pretty well, but you know, people can sue you for all kinds of things. So I don't know. It seems like a kind of like loose answer. I wish he had gone a little bit deeper there.
Can try this with you?
Sure, feel free to come up.
And if she doesn't pass,
If I can't walk.
Hey, if she could walk in those heels, you already have your answer.
So basically go ahead and plug it in.
I love that she's actually testing this to make sure it actually works and that it's not just vaporware.
You're at a 0.04 right now.
That would be legal.
Yeah, you're legal.
Does it tell you if she has bad breath too?
It's funny as you mentioned that there's also another sensor we're looking into. It's for halitosis.
Oh, seriously?
And seriously, I'm starting to think of this as more of a multi-function breathalyzer. So the next one we're actually trying to focus on is diabetes. It's in clinical trials, and it's obviously less intrusive than blood pricking, right?
Charles, how'd you develop it? Are you a software guy? Are you a hardware design guy?
So I used to code back in the day. I built and sold my last company within 18 months. So essentially, I went straight into developing Breathometer as soon as I exited my last company.
If you sold your last business and you did very well, why didn't you take some of that money and invest it in this?
I have. So I started off with the first initial $50,000. I've already raised $500,000 in total from angels.
What are you going to use the money for?
Strictly manufacturing of the product.
Okay, I love the fact that he's built and sold a company before. Like, you know, just having done that, even if it wasn't a huge outcome, you know, gives you confidence that he's the kind of entrepreneur that will go out, get things done, has had an exit, maybe has made a little bit of money, put that in his pocket. So, you know, he's not desperate for cash. I think all of those things are good. I also like that he's raised $500,000 from angel investors already. I mean, I think that helps put him in a better negotiating standpoint, especially in front of the sharks.
well, the good news for you is that both in Europe and Canada, Mexico, US, we're going to almost a zero tolerance on alcohol and driving.
Correct.
That's the trend.
I'm sure you've heard about the Federal Safety Board in the United States that's trying to push down
lowered it.
from 0.08 to 0.05.
I'm a big fan of the sensor business. I've got a company, Motion Loft. We're all about sensors, and I think that's the future of technology. Okay, I'm gonna make you an offer.
Wow,
What I'd
kind
like
of
to do
jumping
is
the
offer you
gun, going right for it.
$500,000 for 20% of the company. That's my offer.
Okay.
I'll give you a chance to talk to other people because
Any
I know
other
you want
sharks?
to.
Okay, so I just want to break this down. So he is asking for $250K at 10%. That on a pre-money basis is a $2.25 million valuation. Now, if we look and we give him the credit of the $140,000, that means that he's valuing this business at, you know, 2.25 million divided by 140K. That means that he is valuing this thing at about 16x. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that like for consumer products, I'm usually looking for businesses that are valued at around, call it 3 to 5x revenue. So to be 16x, that feels super aggressive. I know that there's a technology piece to all of this, but I don't think it's like that big a deal. So I don't know, it feels super expensive in some regards. In others, like, you know, $2 million, $3 million, that is kind of the going rate right now for a seed round in terms of valuation. So it's also not like totally crazy. But here's where I wanted to dive in with Mark Cuban's offer. So he is offering $500K for 20%. And you would think like, oh, that's the same valuation, right? I mean, he's basically paying $250K for 10%, but he's just doing it twice. But actually, if you run the math, it's a lower valuation. And the reason for that is because he's putting more money in. Your post money in both cases is $2.5 million post, but the pre-money takes out the new investment. So what the entrepreneur is asking for here is $250K, but instead Mark Cuban wants to invest $500K, which pushes the valuation from 2.25 down to $2 million. Let's see what the other sharks offer him, because clearly like Mark is aggressive on this deal, but he's also pushing for more dilution from the founder.
Would you let me go in with you?
No.
And handle the retail end?
This is not real. I'm not worried about the retail. That's just like a smidgen versus the long-term benefit.
So Mark is really interested not in the retail opportunity here. He wants to take this sensor and he wants to apply it to lots of other things, maybe medical device related applications, maybe others. My guess is that he's like thinking about this like really big with lots of different applications. But it feels like if he's going to go that route, there is a lot more due diligence I would want to do before I would write that check. I'd want to make sure that this thing really works and really works well and has like good, strong clinical accuracy. Because if it's just like kind of directionally accurate, like it will never be more than like a marginal consumer product.
I'll give you $250,000 for 15%. You wouldn't have to lose that much equity then.
That's not bad. Okay.
It's much less dilutive than Mark's 20%.
Okay.
Okay, so Kevin O'Leary there is offering a $2.7 million pre-money valuation. So it's a lower valuation than what Mark is offering, but he only has to give up 15% of his company instead of 20%. Ultimately, you know, if it were me, I would probably take Cuban's offer because you get more capital into it. You get somebody that's well connected in the sensor space and IoT space and can help make introductions. And, you know, you do it at a slightly higher valuation, which I think is valuable.
Not nearly as much cash.
So just to open up the funding channel of communication, so the whole idea within the next 60 days is to close a full $1 million round from the angels back in Silicon Valley. So what I'm proposing is I'm more than willing to open up the round to potentially involve more than just one shark, because I think there's an incredible amount of value here.
Why don't you let the sharks do the whole round?
That's what I'm proposing.
I don't want to work with the other sharks.
Ooh, sharp elbows.
You want to raise $1 million, don't you?
I do want to raise $1 million.
So Mark's not giving you enough anyways.
Mark's not done talking yet.
Mark's the billionaire.
Charles.
You could write $1 million check.
$250,000 if Kevin will have me on that.
I'll do it. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And I'll give you another $250,000.
For 30%.
Wow. Okay.
And they have no idea what they're investing in.
All right, so the three sharks putting in $750K for 30%. That's a slight bump in valuation, but only slight. It represents a $1.75 million valuation to what Kevin O'Leary originally offered. And they're taking up a bigger chunk of the company, 30%, right? Like that's a huge chunk of the company. I don't know. I mean, you do get these three other sharks, but I don't know.
That's not true.
It is absolutely true.
So you've got 750, 3 times what you asked for today,
Right.
for 30%.
Right.
Very smart. I like to surround myself with people much smarter than me. That's why I have a challenge being up here.
Thank you very much.
I want to match what you're offering. 250,000, unlimited manufacturing,
Okay.
10%.
And you wouldn't want to partake in the groups?
I've tried to get these three bobos together at breakfast one day, and it's hard. You know, it's like we don't need all these people.
There he is. He's getting exactly what he wants. I don't know what Damon means by unlimited manufacturing. I assume that means that he'll help him with the manufacturing aspect of the business. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Here's something else that I want to point out with all of this. I love the dynamics between the different sharks because this same dynamic sometimes plays out in the real world with venture deals where you have one investor, they want it all, they got sharp elbows, they don't want to work with anybody else, they think they're going to add all the value, and then you have other investors that are like trying to work together, get something to work. You know, one of the levers that they use to push is, okay, well, maybe we want more ownership, so maybe we'll give you the valuation you want, or we'll get close to the valuation you want, but we'll just invest more. And that allows us to get the ownership percentages that we want. Anyways, I just love kind of these dynamics and the way they're kind of playing off of each other, right? With Mark Cuban saying, oh, these other investors, they don't even know what they're doing. They don't, you know, they're not going to really add any value. And the other investors kind of pushing back. And you know, Mark Cuban here is the billionaire of the five, right? He's got a lot more money than the rest of them. And so he can kind of push them around a little bit. And that same thing happens. Sometimes you have a fund that's really big or really well known, and they'll also kind of push the other smaller investors around. So anyways, it's just kind of this fun microcosm of like what's happening here amongst the sharks also happens all the time in the real world of venture capital.
Right now, we can't agree. We've got 3, maybe
No, I think
one.
we could agree, Kevin.
But
What if we raise the dollar amount we're
But wait,
putting in?
I'm just saying for $1 million of straight equity and get all the sharks in it. Now, I don't know if Mark wants to play ball, but we need a significant discount to do that. You would be an unbelievable story if that happened.
That's true.
Mark, because of your previous investments in sensors, you need the lion's share. Tell us what that is, because competing with each other is going to be very expensive versus colluding with each
Vito
other.
does
and giving
not
this
want
guy
to do a
every
deal
single
with them.
shark.
Come on, Mr. Cuban.
Damien, you're in on this, aren't you?
I'm willing to go in if Cuban's in, and you'll get all 5 sharks.
Dun, dun, dun. Also, the other thing I want to point out is I wonder if this deal would get done if Mark Cuban hadn't immediately jumped in and thrown down a term sheet, essentially. And sometimes you see that, right? Like there's this FOMO, and you can see it on their faces, right? They're kind of okay, we're kind of listening. And then Mark Cuban comes in hard, and he's like, I'll give you what you want, and I'll give you double, right? And then all of the rest of them are like, maybe there's actually something here. Oh crap, we got to get in on this deal. And you could see this happening in real time. And again, this is another one of those dynamics that happens all the time in venture capital, right? Everyone's kind of hesitant, looking at it, and then somebody plants their flag in the sand and says, this is a great deal. And then everybody, it creates this FOMO, and everybody's trying to get in.
Charles has the potential of raising $1 million, all the funding he needs at this point, if Mark will join the rest of the sharks on a deal.
Damien, you're in on this, aren't you?
I'm willing to go in if Cuban's in, and you'll get all 5 sharks.
Come on, Mr. Cuban. You get the lion's share.
What does the lion's share mean? What equity do I get?
So
You
what do
get
you...
all 5 sharks. You need $1 million.
Now it's your
today.
turn. Now it's your turn to sell me.
Wow.
What can you give us on a straight equity deal? This is your round right here, right now, the whole damn thing.
Wow, that's pretty serious.
Oh, Charles, think.
You got to come up with a really good offer.
Okay. Would you be okay with taking, say, 300, doing 300,000? They split up the 700 amongst them.
I'll do 500K for 15%.
For 15%?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. All 5 sharks will give you $1 million, 500,000 for Mark Cuban for 15%, and 500,000 split amongst the 4 of us for the other 15%. So $1 million for 30%.
Okay, so I think that's interesting because he basically played the sharks off of each other and was able to drive down the valuation, right? Mark Cuban could see hey, I might actually lose this deal to the other sharks. Maybe if I come down, I play ball, we can get a deal done, and I can get ultimately what I want. So if he does $1 million for 30% of the business, that's a $2.3 million valuation pre-money, and then a $3.3 million post. And I bring that up because it's actually right about the valuation that he wanted. And he's giving up 30% of the business, which is quite a bit. So, these investors are going to have quite a bit of control. But, I think it's a pretty good deal. Let's see what he does.
Do it.
Do it.
There's a reason the champagne's open, my friend.
Can I have a second to make a phone call to my
Sure.
CFO?
Yes,
Sure.
of course.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder if Mark Cuban's looking at this deal and he's comparing it to some other deals that he sees and thinks, wow, this is a steal of a deal at this valuation. I'd be paying way more on a valuation basis if I looked at other businesses that were raising from more traditional venture capitalists and so forth.
Provide an offer, all 5 of them. And so basically $1 million for 30% of the company. So I just want to kind of get your thoughts.
$1 million for 30%, it's a $3.3 million valuation. Not a huge valuation.
Sure.
Fundamentally, I'm a little bit worried about too many cooks in the kitchen. They all have big egos. And so, can they work together effectively?
Who wants to bet what he comes back at?
He'll come back at 25.
I say 25.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, let's see what happens. He's been out there a long time.
Charles, welcome back.
Thank you.
You have an opportunity to get all 5 sharks and the power of all sharks behind you.
Right.
Here's the deal. $1 million, $500,000 from Mark Cuban for 15%, and $500,000 from the rest of the sharks. We're going to split it
Right.
for a total of 30% for $1 million. And the power of Shark Tank. What are you going to do?
I accept.
All right. Wow.
That's great.
I gotta tell you, I didn't see that coming, but that's
Thank you.
That's great.
Okay, so I want to do a little postmortem here. If you saw, Mark Cuban was a little surprised, and I think the reason he was surprised is he thought this entrepreneur was kind of working the room. I don't think the entrepreneur really had much of a clue of what he was doing here. I think Mark Cuban got really excited about this deal. He created a bunch of FOMO. The other sharks started competing for the deal, and the entrepreneur just kind of lucked out at the end of the day. That's kind of my read on it. Not to like badmouth the entrepreneur. Like I'm sure he's fine as an entrepreneur, but you know, there was nothing there that I saw that like created the FOMO more than Mark Cuban pushing it. And I think part of the surprise from Mark Cuban's perspective was like, oh wow, like maybe this guy doesn't quite know what he's doing. And here's the interesting postmortem. So part of the reason Mark Cuban came out and said that this was one of his worst deals ever was that like a little bit afterwards, he started seeing this entrepreneur on Instagram traveling all over the world, hanging out with Richard Branson on Necker Island, doing all kinds of stuff. And he was like, what the heck? Like, why aren't you running the business? And sure enough, the company got in trouble at the FTC because their breathometer wasn't actually that accurate. And so they got fined for false claims. They had to take that down. To their credit, they did launch a partnership with Philips to create a new product called Mint to indicate whether or not you had bad breath. I think that's actually kind of an interesting product because, you know, bad breath's one of those things where it's kind of embarrassing, but, you know, people are usually reluctant to tell you if you have bad breath, but you know it like bothers them. And it sounds like maybe there's somebody that's willing to acquire them. Maybe it's Philips. I would be shocked if the investors, the sharks in this case, get all their money back. But yeah, it's an interesting story and interesting outcome. You know, Mark Cuban, you can definitely tell this is an older video, right? I mean, one, the sharks don't have nearly as many wrinkles as they do today in this video. But I also think like Mark was like fairly early into like understanding what Shark Tank was all about and how to play the game and how to play kindly and nice with the other sharks. And, you know, in this deal, he ended up investing like 2.5% of what he's invested to date. And at the time was probably by far like his largest check and probably represented a huge chunk of the money that he'd invested through the show up to that point. When I think about like what are the things that like Mark Cuban and the other sharks missed, I think one, they allowed their egos to get too involved. They allowed FOMO to take over, and they didn't really understand who the entrepreneur was at the core. And they also, I don't think, did enough due diligence on the device. Now, granted, like this is a TV show. They probably didn't have enough time to really validate the product, but I would have liked to have seen them dive a little bit more into understanding what the entrepreneur had done to really validate that the product worked and was very accurate, because I think that's a huge part of this product and this business, and that was never like really truly fleshed out. Plus there were a lot of other things like the liability issues, who's the rest of people on his team, how is he going to get it manufactured, right? There were a lot of question marks here, and I think again at the end of the day the sharks kind of let like egos and FOMO kind of drive them to an ultimate outcome that I think if they had approached this individually, maybe they wouldn't have done this deal. Anyways, those are my thoughts on this deal. Tell me what you thought. What other risks did you identify? What did you like? Would you have invested in this deal? Do you think you could have avoided getting caught up in the FOMO? Anyways, check out my other video where the sharks evaluate the Cheater app and see what I think about that company.